Namaste and welcome. It's Rishi here from meditatewithrishi.com, and today we are going to be exploring the Mimamsa philosophy. This is again one of the most important philosophies. It is responsible for Indian culture as we know it today, with all the vibrancy, all the color, all the love for divinity. So, in fact, without this, you can say that Indian culture would be very, very different. So, like with the other philosophies, we are going to be answering the three questions, which are: why do we suffer? How to become free of suffering? And what is the nature of the self? The nature of the self in Mimamsa philosophy is, again, very different. It is a step forward. And I think you'll really enjoy this. It is a great lens with which you can view the world and conduct your life, essentially. Okay? So let's get into it. Now, Mimamsa is actually one of the older philosophies. Okay? So the sage, the Rishi who gave us this philosophy was Jaimini. Now, Jaimini had two very important students that went ahead and popularized this philosophy. Okay, so these names are names that you will hear again. They are Prabhakar Mishra and Kumaril Bhatt. Okay, so these two were, they made the philosophy famous, essentially. They expanded on it, and they actually both have their own versions of Mimamsa philosophy, which are very similar. Okay, now let's just answer the two questions first. What is the cause of suffering and how to become free of suffering? So here it is very simple. It is your karma that causes your suffering, and the way to come out of the suffering again is your karma. That is the only way. Okay, so Mimamsa actually means scrutiny or investigation. So investigation of scrutiny of your actual karma, your actions, right? So becoming very clear about what are the actions you are taking and the impact they're having. Okay, so what constitutes a good and bad action? We will come to this a bit later. Okay, now the most exciting part of this philosophy is understanding the nature of the self. So Mimamsa has rejected the idea of God. Okay, so if we go step by step, now look, we've done videos on the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophy, Sankhya and Yoga philosophy. If you haven't watched those, I would encourage you to go and watch those videos. They're in the playlist called Spiritual Knowledge on my channel. Okay, so in Nyaya and Vaisheshika, you saw that there is the concept of God, Ishvara. So this concept here, what I mean by God, is a separate being who is, running the creation, essentially, but he is separate from creation itself. Okay, so creation and God cannot combine in Nyaya and Vaisheshika. Then in Sankhya and Yoga, you saw that there is the two elements, matter and energy, right? Purusha and Prakriti, that are the cause of creation, essentially. Now, what Mimamsa is saying, that there are not any multiple realities. So in Nyaya Vaisheshika, you had God and then the eternal atoms and souls as all separate realities, always existing, right? Here you have matter and energy in Sankhya and Yoga. But in Mimamsa is saying that there is only one reality. Okay? This is a huge, huge difference. There is only one reality, and the name given to it is Brahman, which you may have heard before. Okay? So there is only one reality. Okay? There are no two realities. It is only one. Now that is not to say that it is rejecting the whole theory of creation from Sankhya and Yoga. No. But what it's saying is that ultimately there is only one reality. And it is Brahman that is appearing as all the different forms that we see. So you, me, the table and chairs, the mountains, the seas, the rivers, everything is just Brahman appearing as different forms. Okay? So when we say in Mimamsa philosophy that it is our karma that is, the cause of our suffering, the cause of our happiness, what is a good action then, right? So a good action is one where it's saying that it's very important to recognize Brahman through each and every action, each and every ritual. So it is very important to recognize the divinity in anything that you come into contact with. And for this, it has created very many rituals. It is a very ritualistic philosophy. It looks at the early portion of the Vedas where the rituals are described. So it is a very ritualistic philosophy, but ultimately it is telling us that we must recognize the divinity, the Brahman, in everything that we come into contact with, right? So this is where it gets exciting. So what are we speaking about here, right? Everything is Brahman. Everything is divinity itself. You are divinity. I am divinity. Everything we see around is divinity itself. It is Brahman manifesting in a unique form, essentially. So this is why in India you can see that everything is worshipped. The cow is worshipped. The rat is worshipped. Snakes are worshipped. The mountains are worshipped. The rivers are worshipped. Knowledge is worshipped. Wealth is worshipped. Everything that you can think of is worshipped as divinity because it is all Brahman. It is all divinity. Okay? So this is why, right, in the Indian culture, from the outside, somebody coming from outside the Indian culture will look and see that it appears like there are very many gods and goddesses in the culture. Yet Mimamsa is rejecting the idea of a god. So it is not a creator god that is separate from creation. Creation is God itself. God is creation itself. So everything is divine. This is why you have a god or a goddess, which is a symbol representing the divinity of anything that you see. The goddess of wealth is Lakshmi. The goddess of knowledge is Saraswati. The god of strength is Hanuman. Do you see what I mean? Everything is divinity. And our job is to recognize this divinity in everything that we encounter. So this is why, anything, like for example, if you are eating food, right? The food is not just the food is not just food. The food is the ultimate reality. It is Brahman itself. So before you eat the food, there is a ritual, right? You may have seen that when somebody in India buys a car for the first time, bringing the car into the house, it is not just a car. It is Brahman. It is divinity itself. So a whole ritual is done, praying to the car, welcoming the car like you are welcoming divinity. There is a saying in India, Atiti Devo Bhava, which means the guest is God. When the guest comes into your house, it is not just anything that has come. It is Brahman. It is divinity itself that has walked in. This is why you treat the guest like God. This is why even when you are meeting a friend of yours somewhere, it is not just a friend or a human that you are meeting. It is divinity itself. It is Brahman itself. This is why we have the greeting Namaste. Namaste means I bow to the divinity within you. Do you see how beautiful this is? Do you see what a beautiful lens it is in which to view the world? When you are getting married to somebody, you are not just marrying a girl or a boy. You are marrying, my teacher used to say, the ultimate reality itself. You are marrying Brahman. You are marrying divinity. Again, rituals are in play. This is why so many people want to go to Indian weddings, because it's so exciting. There's so much happening, which is, worth watching, So this is the idea, essentially, right? Everything. Rivers, right? Ganga is divine. It is a goddess. The mountains, right? The mountain is Shiva. Everything is divine. The cow is the goddess mother. Snakes are divine. Everything is divine. Everything is divine. So what Mimamsa philosophy is saying is that we must have a sense of divinity, a sense of eternity at all times. The way to become free of suffering is essentially through our actions. So when we are recognizing the divinity in something, the Brahman in something, through our actions, that is a good action, that is a dharmic action. Dharma means the highest ideal action you can take at any given time. The highest ideal action you can take at any given time, okay? So if you are acting by honoring the Brahman in something, that is a good action. Now think about it. You are not going to honor the divinity in something and kill it. You are not going to honor the divinity in something and shout at it. You are not going to see the divine in something and, lie to it. You cannot lie to divinity. So in this way, if you have this lens with which to rule the world, you can see the 5 yamas of yoga, not lying, not stealing, not harming, all these things, they become natural. This becomes a way of life essentially. So the point of Mimamsa philosophy, now obviously it is very ritualistic, okay? So a lot of rituals have been created in this philosophy, which are given in the Vedas essentially. But the point is to recognize Brahman in everything. And if you do this, if you recognize the Brahman in everything, then you will naturally be doing good karma and naturally good things will be happening in your life and you will become free of suffering. So this is the idea essentially, okay? Now, just on this rituals that we are speaking about. So initially, before the more worship type of rituals came into play, what the Vedas have given us, right? So the Vedas are revelations, essentially, to the ancient Rishis, to the ancient sages. So we are saying that the whole creation is Brahman manifesting in different forms. And every form of creation is useful to us. Wealth is useful to us, knowledge is useful to us. Everything that is around, we use it in some way or another. It is useful to us, and hence it is like a tool. A tool is something that we can make use of. So what the Vedas have given us essentially is the concept of the yantra, mantra and tantra, okay? So if you may have heard this before, I just want to give you some clarity on this. So the whole creation is made up of these 3 things essentially. So yantra essentially are the different forms of creation. Yantra is the different forms that we are using, right? And this is a tool essentially. So the yantra is a tool. Now the mantras are given in the Vedas. The mantras are the explanations or the source code that are defining the yantra, that are defining the tool. So every different form that we have in the universe, anything that you can think of, it has essentially the source code, right? That is making it up, the explanation of it. That is the mantra. So the powerful verses that are in the Vedas are the mantras, which are the explanations of the yantras. And the tantra essentially is the ritual to manifest the yantra. The tantra is the ritual to manifest the yantra, okay? So this is a very vast science which has been in Indian culture for as long as we know, essentially. But I hope you understand the whole concept of Mimamsa philosophy. Next, we will be speaking about the Vedanta philosophy, which is very similar to Mimamsa, right? Brahman, it talks about Brahman, but it goes a step forward. It goes a step forward. Now, it's important to know that when I say it goes a step forward, or that, these philosophies have essentially built, one upon the other, it is not to say that all the ideas in the previous philosophies have been completely rejected. No, they have not been completely rejected. They have been built upon. So a lot of what you learn in the previous philosophy still stands, right? So we are not going to say that because everything is one reality, everything is Brahman, that the theory of creation from Samkhya Yoga is void. Of course not. Of course not. That still stands. You will see tomorrow how that still stands. But Brahman essentially lies on top of that, right? So even though you see this in the scientific world as well, I'll explain this in detail tomorrow. But even though there is matter and energy, ultimately everything is one reality. Modern science has now begun to explore this as well, okay? So this is it. This is the Mimamsa philosophy. And if there's anything you're going to take from this, is to apply it to your life. Have this new lens that everything that you see around you is Brahman. Everything that you see is divinity. Everything that you see is divinity. And if you treat it as such, it will treat you as such. It is a very beautiful lens of life. It is a way to make, no matter what your situation is, it is a way to make your life magical. It is a way to make your life filled with love, essentially, and optimism, okay? So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for listening. Namaste.